We talk a lot about the whole person experience and being able to bring your authentic self into work. And the way you do that is you have to create a safe environment. And a safe environment means your voice matters, and you can say things that might be a little uncomfortable, and you can share how you're feeling or how you're doing. And I think that's the way you bring people together, is you have to create culture where individuals can show up who they are. So kind of hear me, see me, this is what matters to me. And I'm a big believer in connecting kind of individual values and purpose to organizational values and purpose, and how do you find those intersections.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Better Works Podcast, People Fundamentals. I'm your host, Alex Lerald, Senior Director of Corporate Marketing. Better Works' core belief in people fundamentals revolves around enabling everyone in the workforce to strive for excellence, to foster creativity, and to acknowledge each individual's contributions. Better Works translates these beliefs into business fundamentals through strategic HR leadership. And in this show, we're diving even deeper into these principles as we hear from the experts about how you can make them come alive in your organization. And in this episode, we're talking to a bona fide trailblazer in the HR tech space, Dan Riley. Dan is the co-founder and CEO of RADICL, an employee experience agency that's been turning heads since its inception in 2020. This conversation is a deep dive into the dynamic realm of employee experience. We're peeling back the layer of RADICL's journey and understanding why it emerged as a force post-pandemic. And Dan provides insights into transformative change and the evolving workplace landscape that we've experienced in the last few years. We discuss why organizations need to make radical changes, not just minor tweaks, especially in the era of hybrid work. And we uncover the shifts that he's witnessed, from employee commitment to people as assets to the changing dynamics of employee experience. But we're not just talking about the technical side. We're getting into the creative side as well. Dan is someone with a plethora of skills, including music, film, and business. So he's just the person to highlight that side for us. We'll also hear about the key ingredients to what's made Dan's lifelong collaboration with his brother so successful. If his comment from over 20 years ago that, quote, change is meant to be uncomfortable still holds today, and why RADICL's original spelling might not have been so safe for our French-speaking friends to use around the office. So stay tuned for this conversation with Dan, recorded live at HR Tech 2023 in Las Vegas. And get ready for a great conversation that blends the latest in HR tech, the essence of employee experience, and the unique harmony of creativity and business. I am so excited to have Dan Riley here. He is the co-founder and CEO of RADICL, an employee experience agency. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yes, well, it's so nice to be here, Alex. We founded RADICL in late 2020, so shortly after the pandemic. I had founded a company before that. We were an employee experience tech listening company. And strangely enough, we were ready to do it again. And ultimately, we believed organizations needed to do better for the people whom they employed. And we knew work was getting ready to be turned upside down. Things were going to be moving hybrid. We were 6 months into the pandemic, cross-functional teams. We knew work was going to change forever, and it continues to be changing so rapidly. So RADICL really was born out of the necessity to change and the necessity to make radical change, not small little tweaks. That was where we started, and we've been growing explosively ever since.
Yeah, huge need. You're right. I mean, that was an inflection point where everything changed, and it makes a lot of sense that companies don't know how to navigate it, because at the same time they're trying to figure this out, they're also human beings experiencing it themselves.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, for the first time, we truly cared about, that simple question that we'd ask in the hallways, how are you doing, became authentic. Like that was really, that used to be small talk before a meeting. How you doing? Like, I'm okay. It meant nothing. After 2020, we realized, the world changed. And when leaders would ask their people, how are you doing? And how are you feeling? And that's like one of the most important questions that you can ask somebody. when you actually care about the response and the person cares enough to give you a true and meaningful response and feels safe enough to give you an honest response. So like that's culture at its best. So we wanted to leverage that and take advantage of what was starting to happen in organizations, of leaders stepping up, employees stepping up. And I want to see that continue. Unfortunately, we're seeing that decline a little bit now. Getting back to business as usual,
It's true.
We'll talk about that.
Absolutely. But I want to know how the name of your company came to be.
Right, yeah. So, like any naming, we went through did a lot of different names. We liked the idea of radical change. We wanted it to be a little street graffiti style, a little bit raw. My brother and I are the founders of the company. We're both musicians. We're both film producers. We both played punk rock music for all of our lives. So
Big
radical
fan
just kind of made sense for what we wanted to do. But we couldn't spell it as radical. It would be impossible to get the domain name. So we started playing around with different spellings. And originally it was RADICL was our first version of it. And I tested that with some global friends. And one of my friends in France, she's in Paris, she said, Dan, cul, because C-U-L, means ass in French. So I'm like, is that okay? She's like, so you might not want radical. For the French speakers, they might like rad ass. And so
That's funny.
So we just dropped the vowel, then we realized we didn't actually need the vowel, and it looked cooler with the CL. So
totally. Yes.
That's how that came about.
I love that. And thank goodness for our French friends who
Yes.
intervene and let us know that we're about to name our company Rad Ass.
Which it might have been fun. And I said, would that be bad? Is it really an insult? She's like, no, it's kind of funny, a funny word. It's not, but just so you know, and it could offend some.
I love that. So you have been in the HR tech space for more than 20 years. And I'm just curious. We talked a little bit about the pandemic and the changes that brought about. But what else has changed? What's the biggest change that you think you've seen in the last few decades as far as how companies are thinking about enabling their workforces and just tech in general for HR?
Yeah, a couple things. I think, number one, we've said for many years, and organizations have said for many years, people are our greatest asset. But the reality is work wasn't really designed with the human in mind. Right? Work was originally designed, if you go back in time, it was an entity to create profit, and people were just a part of making that happen. It wasn't really designed with the commitment to take care of people, understanding that profitability is an outcome of doing all those other things right. So I think that transition over the past decade, especially over the past 3 years, when everything started to speed up and we started to realize the importance of taking care of our people. So I think that commitment to people and truly looking at people as individuals, listening to what matters to them, that's really where employee experience came from, those moments that matter. I always use the analogy, it's like love in a relationship. I could say, I love you once a year to my partner, and I'm done, that's good, I've done my part. It isn't that. It's the little things that I do that are that are surprises, that are not expected. Like that's actually acting and showing love, not just the grand statements of "I love you." So it's like telling your employees, "Here's our purpose statement. Here's our missions. Here's our values." Great, but now they need to feel it every day. So I think organizations are more laser focused on that, and that's been a big change over the past 10, 20 years.
Absolutely. I saw something recently that I thought was so interesting about culture. And, culture is every element of how people work. Culture is whether or not you're on time to meetings. Culture is how many meetings you have. Culture isn't just about the values and the mission statement. It's every interaction. How do you find HR people, responding to this, thinking about this? Do they feel empowered to take this on? Is this something that they alone can bring about this kind of change, or what does that look like?
I think HR is doing their best. I think this conversation we're having, any CHRO, any HR leader would nod their head and say, yes, of course, right? And we need to empower our people more, all this. But again, it's actually, how do you change things? Change doesn't happen overnight. And we set arbitrary timelines for success in organizations. And that's why HR, I think, stops sometimes and doesn't follow through. As long as you're progressing in the right direction, that's change. I use the analogy of, if you were to stare at a flower, you're not going to watch it bloom. But if you come out in 3 days, it will be a beautifully bloom but you have to sort of give it time. So HR has to be committed to people, they have to be committed to putting people first. So inversing the pyramid and really putting people at the top of the pyramid versus just, we have some cool new technology, this is going to make work better for you. And just adding, the 95th HR tech solution to the stack that they're already using.
Exactly.
And most employees are like, I don't need another place to log into, another place to go. So I think HR has a big job ahead of them. And I think there is a commitment to change, and I'm liking some of the trends that I'm seeing, but we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. It's speaking of change, I have a fun question for you, because the internet is forever. And the things we say back in 2002 may show up in a podcast interview. But you did say back in 2002 that HR professionals and their companies are facing a lot of turbulence and that change is meant to be uncomfortable. And here we are 20 plus years later, change is a constant. Tell me about that. What remains true?
I think what remains true is in any successful change, you never arrive. There is no sort of, we're here, we've made it. Change is constantly reimagining, constantly looking forward. And it's funny that I said that. So when was that? 2002? So 20 years ago.
Yeah.
21 years
21
years ago. And it's still uncomfortable. It's a little sad that I said that, and yet we're still facing so much turbulence. But I guess on the other hand, that's normal. I think we're always going to be, you get on any airplane, right? In 20 years from now, it's still going to have experience, but it will get you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In most cases, it does. And turbulence is just, you have to be prepared to brace yourself and think about, again, the pandemic. That was beyond turbulence and complete disruption, and it was very uncomfortable. But human beings have this incredible power to rise to the occasion when needed. So I guess I'm consistent, because I think I've been quoted 3 weeks ago saying a very similar quote.
And wise, because, at the end of the day, the only constant is change. And with the pace of advancement in technology, everything just happens so much faster now. And what is it? Moore's Law, right?
Yes.
And the reality is we will continue to see change. We don't know what it's going to look like. Gen AI, for example, this year. I like to joke, that wasn't on my bingo card for 2023, just a completely disruptive, life-changing technology in everybody's hands. Tell me about your thoughts on that.
Well, number one, to your point, how fast it became, how fast it infiltrated our lives. When anything like that happens so quickly and it already becomes a joke on Saturday Night Live, and then, seriously,
right.
Like it happened that fast. Like everybody was going to ChatGPT, was experimenting with it. All of a sudden, this idea, you can write term papers, you can write mission statements, songs, music. Actually, if we were to talk about music and art, I have some different opinions about that. On the other hand, I see it as an incredible tool, and we have to look at it like that. Now, can we completely trust it yet? No, but can we trust all human beings completely? We do our best, and it's imperfect. If it were perfect, I'd be freaked out, honestly, because then it's perfect in whose eyes, right? And then you get into the whole concept of, well, what's truth? There's facts, but someone's truth might be different than another person's truth based on what they believe in. So I'm fascinated with generative AI. I think it's going to change the landscape if used wisely, if used carefully, responsibly, all the above. And I think any company out there thinking about their product 5 years from now, they do need to be thinking about how it's going to become a part of that.
I completely agree. Being in marketing myself and having been in tech for the better part of the last 15 years, I think we're all going to be working for generative AI companies in 5 years, or if not a company that has a Gen AI strategy, and we have to quickly become experts to figure out what all of this means for our customers.
We do, and I think, real fast on that too. I think there's two, and this is not a binary conversation, but there's kind of two things that can happen with generative AI. We can choose just to blindly trust it, right, and believe this is right because it feels more authoritative, like versus going to Google and searching for something. You kind of pick and choose, and you choose. If the page looks more, if you'll actually choose something that looks like it's more important. And like when you're searching for anything in Google, with ChatGPT, it just gives you this very well-crafted response back. And you say, I believe that because it's written like a college professor would write. So immediately we just blindly believe it. And I think that's dangerous. The other side of what could happen is we just blindly say we don't believe it because there's a few things that are wrong. And I think either is dangerous. We have to challenge it and we have to help it grow.
Yes.
And we have to help update it. And as we know, some of the generative AI is sort of about a year and a half or 2 years behind and updates. And a lot's happened in this world in the past 2 years. A lot's happened in the past week. So unfortunately, you have to use it, understand what it is, do your homework, your research with it. It is an incredibly powerful tool, and it will change our lives.
Yeah. Sure. And we just conducted some research. We asked over 1,000 employees about their sentiments and their level of awareness, fears, insecurities, and we found some really interesting stuff. And the reality is employees are using these tools whether or not their employers sanction it and make them available. And that raises some interesting questions. I think companies have to respond really quickly. Is this coming up with your clients? Are you having these conversations now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was speaking about it in Austin, maybe Austin.
One of those Texas towns.
Yeah, I was in Texas. And it was a pretty big room, about 100 people were in the room, organizations, and my question was, how many of you use it and will continue to use it? And every single person in the room raised their hand. And then we went around and kind of had a few people explain how they're using it, and everyone had a very different way they're using it. So, yeah, I mean, whether it's sanctioned or not, or it's just becoming a part of how we work. And again, I think it's a tool that helps speed things up. We don't want to get overly reliant on it. I think using your own voice is really important. And that's where I get a little worried, like just sort of, this sounds like it's well crafted and written and I'm going to use this. And that's just the generative side of AI. But so anyway, I'd love to see us use it a little more as a tool and not just as a replacement for thought. So again, there's worries where I get nervous about it, but ultimately I'm a huge fan of where it's going to take us.
I love that. I completely agree. So I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about your company's RADICL now, but then you also co-founded another company called Modern Survey.
Yes.
With your brother.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me about how that came to be. And my brother is also the co-founder of RADICL too. Right.
Yeah. So we've pretty much done. A lot of people talk about working with siblings, and he and I have always been best friends. And after he's 2.5 years older than me, if
I'm really close to my baby sister myself.
But right after school, I was a little behind him. When we both graduated, we started bands and we played in bands together for 10 years. We kind of dropped out of life together. I mean, jokingly, but before we founded Modern Survey and just put out records and toured. And so whether it's been art, creation, building a company, ultimately, it's about creating something and challenging each other. We're good balance for each other. He's a little more organized, a little more, thoughtful. I bring a little more of the just.
You're the ideas guy.
He's the ideas guy too. I bring a little more of the chaos to the equation, and I mean that in a healthy way.
The agent of chaos.
And I'm very confident and kind of bring heart into anything we do. And Pat's he knows how to really think through it, organize it, prioritize. So between the two of us, we're kind of a nice fit, and it's worked. And I can't imagine not doing something with him. So
I love that. I think that's so cool. And you're both musicians, so
yes.
I'm going to ask you a completely not HR related question.
Oh, HR is just one piece of my life.
Right? Yeah. We're multi-dimensional beings.
Yes.
Album that changed your life.
An album that changed my life. Yeah, you know what? So when I can't remember how old I was, probably 12, was an album by the band Rush, 2112.
Yes, I know that album well.
That changed my life. When I heard that record, I was a huge Led Zeppelin fan already, and The Who, and I loved it, but I heard 2112, and I think it was because of the time signatures, that like it was challenging to listen to. It was just, and I loved how heavy it was, and it was moody, and it was unique, and obviously the singing, you either hate it or you love it. I loved it. So Rush ended up becoming one of my favorite bands ever since that record. But that was that changed my life musically for sure.
I love that. I'm a big fan of Rush. My dad's a big fan. Shout out to my dad, Jim, if you ever listen to this. Thanks for introducing me to Rush. Great band.
They are. I think I ended up seeing them, many times in concert.
Oh, cool. I saw them once.
You saw them once?
With REO Speedwagon of all bands.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very random.
Interesting.
It was great.
Yeah. Well, they're like a good example, I think, of anything you do in life. You put heart into it, and you're decent and good people. Like that band always seemed like they just did their own thing. They played music because they loved music. They loved challenging the status quo. It wasn't about the lifestyle of being a rock star. And now they're, retired and done, and they look back in their career and like there's a lot of respect there. So whether it's you're an HR company or you're whatever it is, you put everything you have into it. You live and breathe it in that, and then there's just more respect to go around.
Kind of related to music, and I love how this is all intersecting with HR and challenging the status quo, but what did you find more challenging of all the things that you've done in your life, which you've had a lot of different careers, starting a company, creating music, or producing a film? What's the most challenging?
So, well, all right. First of all, they all come with their own set of challenges, and they're all interrelated to some degree. They all have a commitment to storytelling, and let me explain what I mean by that. Creating a business isn't. There's always a story around why you're doing what you're doing, and there's an arc to your story, and in a movie there's an arc to the film, right? There's characters that come in and out, and ultimately you're trying to leave the audience or the viewers with, or a song you're writing with something that moves them and is meaningful for them. And you want them to listen to it again. Same thing with starting a business. You want to build a business that someone cares enough about, a technology to use again. So as far as what's more challenging, I'm going to have to say probably creating a business.
Yeah.
Only because the lifespan of that is very long, and it becomes a part of, you wake up, and you work all day. Music is challenging, but I find it's more focused. You can really focus on art, and with the business, there's so much to think about, right? So it's just more moving pieces. On the other hand, my brother, he might argue that producing, so typically been executive producer, he's been producer for the films we've done. Executive producer can be a little more higher level and kind of, help with coming with ideas and kind of screenings, and the producer sort of manages all the details. So he might say producing a movie is just as hard. He probably would. But I would say they all share certain skills. And I'd say one of those skills are the people around you, whether it's your bandmates, whether it's your team and the organization you work with, or whether the team you put together in making a film. You can't do it alone. And you have to be willing to delegate, and you have to be willing to listen to those around you. I mean, even if you're a director or it's your idea, the best ideas come out of multiple people working together. So
true. At the end of the day, a company is comprised of people. And sure, you can certainly do things on your own, but to accomplish your goals, you need everybody bought in, and you need everybody empowered and enabled and supported, because it does take everybody, right?
It does, and they need to, and for that to happen, I mean, we talk a lot about the whole person experience and being able to bring your authentic self into work. And the way you do that is you have to create a safe environment, and a safe environment means your voice matters, and you can say things that might be a little uncomfortable, and you can share how you're feeling or how you're doing. And I think that's the way you bring people together, is you have to create culture where individuals can show up who they are. So kind of hear me, see me, this is what matters to me. And I'm a big believer in connecting kind of individual values and purpose to organizational values and purpose, and how do you find those intersections.
And that's how you get the best work, right?
Absolutely.
That's how you get the results.
That's how you inspire people to bring their best. And that's how organizations ultimately succeed.
I love that. Well, Dan, it has been such a pleasure to have you here. And I'm so glad you stopped by to talk.
And it's been my pleasure. And I love what you guys are doing at Better Works.
Yeah. Speaking of Gen AI, some cool new capabilities, streamlining things, making it easier for managers to provide feedback, which, if it's easier, they'll probably do more of it, which is good, right?
That is very, very good. So, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
In the wake of the pandemic, organizations were confronted with the imperative to embrace radical change, not just incremental adjustments. RADICL, born out of this necessity, thrives on the commitment to make work truly better for the people it serves. Through his work, Dan discovered that the significance of genuine care for employees becomes evident. He highlighted the need for organizations to continue fostering a culture where leaders genuinely care about their people, ensuring that the question, "How are you doing?" goes beyond mere small talk and becomes a cornerstone of a thriving workplace culture. So here's what you can do at your organization to make this a reality. First, prioritize employee experience. Are you genuinely creating an environment where individuals feel seen, heard, and valued? Assess and identify areas for improvement. Second, embrace change with purpose. If 2020 taught us anything, it's that change is inevitable. We may be leveling off post-pandemic, but turbulence will happen again. Dan called it back in 2002. So embrace change purposefully, ensuring that it aligns with the well-being and growth of your workforce. Foster a mindset that sees change as an opportunity for positive transformation. Lastly, encourage a culture of open communication. Create an environment where open communication is not just encouraged, but embedded in the organizational DNA. Leaders and employees should feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, concerns, and ideas. As you embark on these initiatives, remember that change is a journey, and fostering a positive workplace culture is an ongoing effort. This idea is universal and applicable to whatever direction your career may take. As Dan illustrated, whether you're a musician, a filmmaker, or a corporate business leader, having a great team that works together is essential. We can't do it alone. Be sure to stay tuned for our next episode of the People Fundamentals podcast. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google to find out what's in store. And if you like what you hear, share us with your friends and colleagues. We'll see you again soon.